Good afternoon and welcome to the Recruiter Zone live chat. I'm going to just get my guests on screen. My name's Louise Rights and I've got audio problems as per usual. Can you hear me okay, Stephen?
You've all of a sudden gone clear again, so you're perfectly fine.
Well, I shall do my introduction. So today we're talking about GDPR, what it is, should I care, what the important issues are for recruiters, and we are joined by a fabulous guest, Helen Haddon. But before Stephen starts to introduce Helen and interview and ask some questions, I want to thank our sponsors, who are Firefish Software. Firefish is a sales and marketing recruitment platform which helps recruiters reach and engage and place more candidates. And Stephen's pointing to the sign behind him. So, as usual, I'm going to do the technical stuff and Stephen's going to do the majority of the chatting with Helen. I'll hand it over to you, Stephen.
First of all, Louise, can you see Helen? I can't see Helen at the moment.
I'm here.
We know Helen. That's perfect. So yes, welcome and thanks everyone for joining us. I think we have quite a few viewers today, and obviously over the coming week we normally get a very high volume of people who are interested. The subject today, GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, is something that I saw a statistic just earlier. Only 39% apparently of UK decision makers think the EU GDPR applies to them. 39%. 20% of companies don't even know about it. Certainly in the recruitment sector, recruitment employment sector, 100% of everyone should at the very least know that it's coming, even if they haven't yet done something about it. So what we're going to do today with Helen is get into the areas where A, we're going to be a lot more informed about it. B, we're going to have a sense of urgency about how important it is to prepare and prepare early, even if we should have been doing something already. And see what are the differences in the application of the legislations for different types of organisations, and what you need to know, or at least be aware that you have to or don't have to do in relation to that. So first of all, can I warmly welcome Helen. Thanks for joining us. Helen, before we crack on, can I ask you to give us just a very brief summary on your profile and background for those watching?
Absolutely. So I have spent last 20 years working in recruitment firms, basically operational level. So everything to do with making a business run. I'm not a recruiter, but I have very, very extensive experience of recruitment, interim management, in-house, executive search, etc. When I realised what the GDPR would mean for businesses, I began to think about what it meant for the recruitment sector, and have worked on developing a package to help people do what they need to do in a much more efficient way than if you're doing it yourself. So I'm working with a law firm, a security firm, and my own team. So GDPR is currently my specialist subject. Okay,
so for someone who was uninitiated or someone who had just landed from Mars or Planet Recruitment, what exactly what are the key things to know about GDPR, and when does it come into force?
Okay, so as you said, the GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a European regulation, and it comes into force on the 25th of May next year. So so the unusual thing about it, although it is a European regulation, it's actually a human rights regulation rather than a piece of data regulation. It's actually replacing the existing Data Protection Act, which is nearly 20 years old now and really doesn't protect people's rights around their own data. So the whole reason for the GDPR was to put basically power back into people's hands over their own data. So essentially, sort of beginning of the recital says that everybody has their own right over their own privacy. That is a basic human right, and this is what the GDPR is about. So I think the name is a little bit misleading because everybody thinks, it's data, it's about my database, but actually this is about people having rights over their own information, which, I think every one of us thinks is a good thing because everybody has so much data on us.
So it's not nearly as dry a topic when you start to think about the individuals concerned.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So how does it differ from the old Data Protection Act, which I remember that coming in, and of course was written in a time when almost nothing was online in terms of personal data?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of similarities, and the Data Protection Act is a privacy law, but this is much, much wider, and there's a lot more obligations on people who are holding your data. So companies who are holding data have got a lot more obligations now. So, for example, under the Data Protection Act, if there was a breach, if you lost somebody's data or something happened, reporting that to the regulatory authority, which in the UK is the ICO, is voluntary. Now, obviously, none of us go running around saying, I've done something wrong. Under the GDPR, you have 72 hours to report a breach, and it's mandatory.
Yeah.
So, quite a big difference. And then there's a huge amount of differences around the rights for individuals. So at the moment, under the Data Protection Act, people can see their information, but as you're probably aware, there's a £10 fee for doing that, which is not very much, but it's a bit of a barrier. You have to write a check, you have to put it in the post, all the rest of it. Under the GDPR, there's absolutely no barrier. Anybody can ask for their information. There's no fee attached, and you have to respond within particular timescales. So if you don't respond to a request within 30 days, then that is a breach. So you've got particular timescales and things that you've got to actually start complying with. So those are kind of big areas. The other really big area, which is one of the headline grabbers, is the size of fines. So the maximum fine under the Data Protection Act at the moment is £500,000. The GDPR fines start at €10 million, or 2% of your global turnover. Yeah, I love the face. I put something on Twitter like that this morning, actually. I wish I'd videoed it. Or up to €20 million and 4% of your global turnover, whichever is the greater. So, this is eye-popping stuff in terms of the fines. And this is really, why it's grabbing the headlines. And really it shows the amount of weight that, that regulators are putting on people's privacy. This can't.
Well, whilst it's not an area that I would want to focus on as an old school recruiter, one of the things that occurs to me is if an agency, a recruitment agency, for example, had a request from candidates for copies of their personal data, then that's one thing, and obviously there's a degree of work in that. If lots and lots of candidates ask for it, then that would be a real bind, and if there are potential fines in it. So, as if I was a really cynical recruitment agency owner, then I might encourage candidates to mount a campaign against my biggest rival, just to annoy them. But I'm being, Louise is shaking her head, but I'm being very cynical. But it's entirely possible that in the court of human opinion on social media, these sorts of things can go arms and legs. And if a candidate for some reason is annoyed at one thing or another, they could start to gather together other candidates to lay siege, if you like, to a recruitment company who might not be doing things the way they think they should do. Even if they are complying, they still have to then produce the information. So
I think this is one of the things that people basically are saying, is that this, taking away this barrier, it could become a little bit like PPI, where everybody's starting to try and see what they can get. Because in addition to the fines, people can also sue you if there's a breach for material and immaterial damages. So immaterial damages are basically hurt feelings. So say you've lost somebody's CV and their boss finds out that they were looking for a job and they, their career was damaged by that. They could sue you for that. So actually, the amount of damages is quite high, and some of the lawyers are reckoning that actually, particularly ex-employees could start using this much more in sort of cases against their employers.
Will it be the case that, so some people might say, well, that's a bit of crazy scaremongering, that won't happen in real situations, but will it be the case that we won't know how hard or how firmly these things are going to be applied until May next year when things come into effect. We won't know until it happens.
We won't know. I mean, obviously, it's a new piece of regulation. Obviously, case law is going to be really important in terms of how it's interpreted. So at the moment, you know, it's everybody's kind of best guess. And once the regulators start fining people, and you've got to remember that the regulators are funded by the fines that they raise. Okay, so they are going to start fining people. You know, and they have said that they will fine. But I think, you know, let's not focus on the fines so much. I think it's much more to focus on what the regulators try and get people to do in terms of the positives of protecting people's data, because I think that's really
absolutely. Now, one instance comes to mind. I always do this, talk about, you know, things way back, but in my very first job in recruitment, we had the little candidate cards where you would fill them out with all the personal information, and stacks of them, thousands of them, literally stacked up against one of the windows. One day, it was a hot day, someone opened the window and literally thousands of these cards flew out into the street. And we all ran out to collect the cards because, of course, every instance of those, this was even before the Data Protection Act, but each instance of those would be a potential losing of your license situation. And of course, there were licenses then for recruitment. So, but again, as you say, the crux of the matter is not so much about the regulation and being forced to do things that you might not otherwise do, but that you should be doing these things because it's in the interest of candidates, and it's in the interest of employers, and it's absolutely in the interest of the people who are holding the data, because they need to be able to show that they are operating to professional high standards.
So it's about confidentiality and trust, isn't it? And if you're going to trust somebody with your information about your salary and your career, then you want to feel that's going to be secure. So it should be something that everybody's doing.
Are there any obligations in this regulation to inform candidates, to make sure that candidates themselves are educated on their own rights, or can?
Yes. So there's a huge amount. So basically, the whole thing is around transparency.
Okay.
So when you have somebody's data, so if I give you my CV, you've got to make it clear to me what you're doing with this. Okay. Just because I give you something doesn't mean you can pass it around to all your friends. You can do all sorts of monitoring on it, etc. It's got to be clear to people. So that's one thing you need to make sure it's absolutely transparent. If you're doing something that isn't transparent, then you're beginning to blur the lines. And somebody finds out you're doing something, you're doing some kind of monitoring, even IP addresses are covered in this, then you're beginning to get an issue.
Okay.
You've also got an issue around if people don't know that you have their data. So say, for example, you pulled something off LinkedIn or you found something about them online. You have 30 days to tell them that you've got their data, or you have to get rid of it.
So if I was data mining information from LinkedIn, or if I had access to one of the big job board CV libraries and was simply hoovering up information, I can't just take the information and put it into my database. I need
you can, but you need to be able to demonstrate where you got that from and what's your legal basis for processing it.
Okay.
So a lot of things in the GDPR are around being able to provide documentation. So unlike the data protection, where it's a few little tick boxes, there's a lot more. I think of it in terms of like the exam question, you know, when you studied exams way back when, and the teachers used to say, "Do you show your workings?" So even if you've got the wrong answer, you could show your thinking was right.
Okay.
And that's what the regulator's saying, is that if you get a breach and you get an investigation, the first thing they'll do is come in and say, "Okay, show us your workings. Show us what's your basis for holding data. How long are you holding it for, etc." So you've got to be able to actually show them something and not just come up with a smart pollock. Well, we thought that would be okay.
In your view, would it be acceptable to build up a database of particular types of candidates simply for research purposes in the sector that you were recruiting in?
Well, I think that depends how you need to be able to demonstrate why you need that. So so there's three reasons you can hold data. One is under contract. So if you've got a contract with somebody or client, etc., then you need to hold their data, obviously. Then there's something called consent, which is easy because somebody says to you, you can have my data and you can use it for such a reason. And then there's something called legitimate purpose. And a recruitment business obviously has a legitimate purpose in holding people's information.
Yes.
But you've got to comply with the transparency rule and also the 30-day rule if people don't know you've got their data. All right. So it's a little bit complex, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer.
Okay.
What you've got to go back and do is think about it as an organisation, as your own business.
Okay. I have a question from Audra in the States who asks about how the regulations will affect other parts of the world. So, is it true that any country that's doing business with the EU or countries like the UK who by then may have Brexited but adopted the EU regulation?
We are adopting it. We're adopting it.
Okay. So any organisation elsewhere in the world that's doing business with areas that have EU individuals, they need to comply even if you were in Abu Dhabi, Sydney, or New York.
Yeah, so this is the really, really unusual thing about this piece of regulation, is that because it applies to the individual, it applies to European citizens or any citizen. That's actually the European Economic Area, all right, so slightly wider than Europe. So if you are holding the data of any European citizen, then this regulation applies to you in respect of that person's data.
So could an organisation abroad be fined in the same way? Could they be found in the same way?
Yes, but how that's going to actually work, that's going to be really, really interesting.
Okay.
But technically, that is the intent of it. And data privacy lawyers are saying this is going to kind of start rippling, right through the world in terms of human rights.
Yeah. So someone else on the side asks, are there any changes to safe harbour laws? Now, I must confess that's an area that would be beyond me, but...
Well, safe harbour's pretty much been blown out of the water in any case.
Okay.
So that's essentially that's around data security, and one of the things that you need to do is look at who is holding your data, is that secure, etc. And there was previously an arrangement which has now gone. So yes, there are changes already on that.
So if I'm an employer or indeed a recruitment agency and I have the data of Miss X from Liverpool, she's given me permission. She knows I have her data. Yeah. Confident that I'm doing the right things with that data. Yeah. Is there a time limit on which I can hold that data without going back to Miss X and asking, can I keep this information still?
Okay, so helpfully it says you mustn't hold that data for longer than is necessary.
Okay.
And also you must keep it up to date.
Okay, so that's relatively woolly. And in terms of up to date in recruitment terms, you could say, well, at least annually, you need to double check that the information is correct or needs fresh information added to it. Yeah.
And with consent, it's lots of lawyers are saying you shouldn't try and get anybody's consent because consent is quite complicated. Because say, for example, somebody gave you their data and said, you can have my CV just for this particular role that we're talking about now. Yeah. But if I don't get that role, you mustn't hold my data anymore. If you continue to hold it, then you're actually breaching that person's consent, and there's a higher level of fines for breaching consent. So you need to be really careful about what they're complicated.
Going back to the workings between recruitment companies and employers, a recruitment company will know they need to work to the standard. Does the employer have an obligation or responsibility to ensure that the recruitment agency themselves is meeting that standard, has established policies and is looking after information in a certain way?
So there's an obligation both ways. There's an obligation from the recruitment company in terms of who they're passing information to make sure that they're going to deal with that properly. And then the company recruiting needs to know that data has been collected properly, processed properly, secured. So there's obligations both ways. Yeah.
So if I have the CV of candidate X from Liverpool, she's a lawyer, and I send it to an employer, if I just send it to one of the partners or one of the hiring managers and not to HR, I need to be absolutely confident that that's going to be dealt with properly, that the individual I've given the information to isn't going to tell someone in the pub later on that night or pass it on to a former colleague with another firm. I need to be absolutely sure that the data is going to be secure. I would imagine that there will be tracking software that will come up to make sure that every time a document is opened, a notification is sent to make sure that you know where it's gone and whose hands it is. Have you seen any of that kind of technical solution come up?
I've seen a lot of people be using portals so that the information isn't passed over email. People have got logins, who's accessing it, etc. So those kinds of things, are definitely happening.
So if a recruitment agency had all their data in the cloud and they didn't send a document to an employer, but they gave access to a document to the employer, so that the employer logged in and had a look at the CV of Miss X, then you've got a way in which you can see who has opened and when they've opened that document. There's tracking possible on that. Again, on the technical side of things, with so much information nowadays being held in the cloud, how would that affect how you select and control the technical companies who are maintaining your infrastructure?
So again, it's your responsibility to make sure that whoever is holding your information is giving you the right guarantees. So if, for example, you have got you need to know where your data is being hosted, because it might be hosted in India, for example, the US, which are outside the European Economic Area. So you need to ensure that that's being dealt with properly. So it's, when you start looking at all these different chains in your business, where you're getting information from, who's holding it, who you're giving it to, you start coming up with quite long lists, who has access, your staff, who has access to your premises. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think through.
And if an employer is maintaining a talent pool for a particular purpose, they're not hiring people right now, but they're keeping people lukewarm, and at some point might go back to them to recruit from that talent pool. They need to make sure that the policy is not only posted on their website, but is made very available to all candidates that are part of that talent pool.
So transparency is absolutely key.
Okay.
I think I think sometimes what people find quite helpful is I've got a couple of stories that I can explain about typical situations in a day-to-day scenario. So if you just think about, for example, somebody leaving a laptop on the train, after GDPR, somebody leaves a laptop on the train, it's unencrypted, somebody picks it up, they open it and they find all this data. That's a breach, right? Big problem, reputation problem, etc. So
that's mainly MI5 that do that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So they need to tighten up things a bit. So if, for example, a company had not done anything, they hadn't got an IT security policy, they hadn't trained their staff, etc., etc. When the regulator comes in and says, show us your workings, then they've got nothing to show. They cannot show they adequately tried to protect that information. However, if they could show that actually we encrypt all our laptops, we train staff not to use their home laptops, and this guy actually used his own home laptop. We have policies around the way that people work outside the office, and actually this guy who left his laptop underwent a training on such and such a date when this was covered. In that scenario, what you're showing is you've done everything that you can, but actually something happened which is outside your control. One of your staff decided to do something off-piste,
You've got deniability.
So in that case, the lawyers are saying you actually probably wouldn't get a fine at all.
Okay.
You've demonstrated what you've done, and obviously things will go wrong. People do make mistakes. So so there's a whole, I've got a couple of other stories if you've got time, but that just sort of demonstrates how you can protect yourself from the risks. You need to assess the risks, and then you need to be able to take some actions, demonstrate you've done that, and that will essentially protect you when things go wrong.
Well, can I ask about a particular scenario that's very common in recruitment? So we all know of a situation in recruitment where Joe Bloggs, the recruiter, has a CV of a particular candidate that he's gotten from let's say Monster. He's downloaded the CV. The candidate looks perfect for a certain vacancy. He hasn't called the candidate, but he doesn't want to waste any time by messing around with phone calls. He sends it straight off to the hiring manager of a client of his, an employer. He hasn't asked the candidate, but another agency has asked the candidate and sends the CV with the candidate's permission. So agency B has complied and asked for permission to submit this candidate for this particular to that particular employer. Now, in the past, employers haven't really had to be referees in that scenario. They simply call it one way or the other, or they'll say the first CV that comes, we'll go with that. Will it be the case now that that scenario will be much more controlled and controllable because of the GDPR?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things there. First of all, you need to have a look at where you're getting the information from. So in that case, Monster. What is somebody expecting when they're putting their CV on Monster, okay? So that needs to be completely transparent. If it says that a recruiter will always let you know what they're putting you forward for, then obviously that's not transparent if you're taking it and presenting them to jobs that they don't know about. If it says, well, you can, you put it out there and it's fair game, whoever uses your data, then that's something different. So you've got to think about, from the individual's point of view, is it transparent what I'm doing with their data now? Do they know about this? Okay. So that is the key thing. It's the transparency rule. Okay. Would I be okay with this?
On the content of CVs, are there now? I've received gazillions of CVs in a lifetime of recruitment, and often people will include lots of information there that I frankly don't have a right to. They shouldn't be giving me, and they'll include it all the same. That might be, include their passport number, their social security number, their driving license number, their next of kin, basically everything that I could use to steal their identity. If I was passing their information on to someone else, is there any further cleaning of that information I should do before passing that on to an employer that would be covered by the GDPR?
Yeah. So basically, there's a concept of what's called minimization. So basically, you only need to give people what they need to have. Okay. So if you've got somebody's bank details and you're passing it on to an employer, you don't need to do that. All they need to know is about what's this person done before. So you need to be thinking about, if you've got all the information on somebody, what's the minimum you need to pass on, and what are you doing to minimize the risk to that person? Okay. So that's another key aspect of it. It's the appropriateness of how much information you're passing on. Okay,
but again, that could be a judgment call. There are areas that we already should be cleaning out of CVs, such as if someone gives a CV to me and it tells me their religion, then I shouldn't be passing that information on to an employer.
So religion comes under what's called special category data. And there's a higher level of responsibility if you have a high category. So if that's religious, ethnic, all those kind of things.
And of course, the age as well. You can't put someone's age
on. Age actually doesn't come under it, but I would, you just need to be really careful and make sure that everybody in your business understands what these kind of special categories are. Because that can get you into further hot water if you're passing that on.
No, we've seen in the past few weeks, as recent as lots of instances of hacking and ransomware attempts and so on. And of course, any organisation that's holding personal information on a large number of individuals is going to be very susceptible to that sort of thing really affecting their business in a serious way. If that sort of thing happened, if you're an organization and you had a ransomware attack, it kind of sounds ridiculous to say, but should you pull out the stops and pay whatever they're asking for, or just hold it out and say, well, I can't at all engage with someone who's already compromised my data? Would there be a call if it came?
Well, I think I think that's a separate issue. I think from a GDPR perspective, you have to assess the risks. So you need to assess the risks of your IT systems, and you have to take appropriate action to protect those. So you need to have, people. I ask people, what about your IT? Have you looked at your IT security? Oh, that's all outsourced. Yeah, but do you know how secure it is? Well, I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's not thinking. It's actually your responsibility to find out.
Yes.
Is it or isn't it secure? Because if you do get an attack and you were found liable because basically you left the back door open, or albeit your IT supplier, it's you that's liable because you
can't wash your hands of it.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all about assessing the risks and then taking appropriate action and documenting it. Documenting is absolutely key.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, I know that you're appearing at a couple of upcoming events talking about GDPR. Can you tell us a little bit about those and when people can come along to see you? Sure.
So I think tomorrow there's another webinar where I explain a little bit more about how you can protect yourself. That's through Dillerstone Systems. That's at 5 o'clock tomorrow, UK time.
Okay.
I'm speaking for Invenius in September, 21st of September. We're doing a number of in-house network and the firm, speaking at those.
Yeah.
There's a whole load more.
That's the Forum of In-House Recruitment Managers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I'll share those links in the blog, Stephen. I've got those from Helen. So the upcoming events I'll put in the blog post if people are interested in some of those webinars. And Helen's also shared a couple of other ones which she's not involved in very magnanimously, which I'll include as well, just so people can get a view of what they are for maybe the different types of businesses they operate in.
Sure. And head over obviously to our website, our Twitter feed as well. We can keep up to date with what's going on.
Well, before we finish, are there any questions that I've not covered that would be really important for our audience, who are primarily recruitment agencies, but some employers as well?
Yeah. Well, I think, really it's the biggest risk for people is thinking it doesn't apply to them. I think particularly if you're quite small, you think nobody's going to be bothered with me, and it's true. A regulator's not going to come knocking on your door saying, show us what you've got.
Yeah.
The only reason you're going to get them knocking on your door is because something has gone wrong, a candidate or a client or an ex-member of staff, something's gone wrong, and then you're investigated. And the balance of risks are outside your business. So you need to protect yourself by taking some actions and do as much as you can. So, don't be complacent. I think that's the biggest risk.
And don't leave it till the last minute.
And no, don't leave it till the last minute, because there's quite a lot to be done.
So the clock is ticking. The legislation comes into effect on what date is it? 25th of May? 25th of
May. There's something like 190 working days left now.
Okay, so get your skates on.
Helen, I think you do. Do you offer a free audit for recruiters? Is that for any recruiters?
Yes, we do. So I have a free audit which you can go through just to see. It's a GDPR readiness audit. It'll probably scare you a bit because there's 70 questions, but at least it gives you a little bit of an indication of some of the areas you should be looking at. It's not all of the areas, but it's certainly a lot of the key areas. So if you don't know the answer to those, I know somebody who does.
Okay, I will share the link to the it's on your website, isn't it? I'll share a link to that here for. There you are, for people in the stream, and I'll put it onto the blog post. And Christine from Firefish, who are our sponsors, has said that Wendy wrote a blog about candidate data and GDPR as well. So I know that Wendy's content is always great. So I'll put that into the summary afterwards.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Helen.
Yeah,
thank you. Okay, good luck everybody with the GDPR.
Well, thank you so much, Helen, and thank you, Stephen, for hosting as usual. And I think that we should be back with another show in a couple of weeks. And Stephen, you're starting a new series of live chats. Talking about Out You For.
Yeah, Louise has pushed me to do this. Well, it was my idea, but I've been holding off on starting the first one. I'm going to start a series of crowdcasts entitled Tell Me I'm Wrong. So I'm known for having fairly outspoken opinions on a whole manner of things. But I quite, more than anything, I like to be proven wrong on something so that I change my opinion and then I'm right again. So what I'm going to be doing is having a series of guests who will tell me not only why I'm wrong, but how I'm wrong, and persuade me to change my mind. And I hope to start the first one of that next week, a week from Thursday. So that will be, the date would be the 20th of July. So I believe my first guest will be Hung Lee, who is also a man who is not shy in coming forward. So tune in for that.
Great. I'll put a link to the blog post. Put a link to that show in the blog post as well, and then we'll obviously share it on the Recruiter Zone channel. So thank you again, Helen. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much, Firefish, for sponsoring the
Okay.